Pozdrawiamy całą drużynę Legendary, szanownego pana rektora i oraz cały tutaj zarząd i wszystkich nauczycieli na Politechnice Rzeszowskiej.
Ja mogę powiedzieć w sumie tylko jedno. In Poland. Polska górą.
Awesome. Great to meet you guys. Well done today. We hope to see you next year. Back to you guys.
That was a wonderful interview there with the legendary Rover team who just finished competing in the excavation and construction task, and lovely to see them sending some messages back home. And if you're tuning into the live stream, we welcome you here to South Australia. The sun has come out, so I can now say sunny South Australia on the Roseworthy campus at the University of Adelaide. And we've got a pan shot here, pitch B, where the University of Wollongong have just set up their rover in the start gate for their attempt at the mapping and autonomous task. They are 9 minutes into their allocated time slot. Base station team there, getting things ready. No hands on the controller, so we are going to hypothesize that they are beginning with an autonomous attempt. Of course, teams start in the autonomous mode if they are choosing to attempt it, but once they pick up their controller and they drive, they will be in the non-autonomous mode and they cannot switch back. Spoke to Wollongong yesterday about some of the design changes with their rover for this year, and chassis was a really big focus, trying to reduce the overall weight of that rover. They definitely have one of the thinnest chassis we've seen of this competition, packing in all of those onboard computers in that tiny pizza box shape. I'm wondering what time they've had be able to develop an autonomous system, something that is always an ongoing challenge for teams, particularly as they have so many other subsystems to think about too. You've got the scoop for excavation and construction, you've got the processing of frozen regolith and potentially a drill or some sort of auger design for the space resources task, robotic arm for manipulation of triggers and switches on the processing plant for the post-landing task, an RFID reader again for that task, paver placement for excavation and construction. When you start to add up all of these systems, you begin to see how teams love to come back year after year after year and just keep improving all of those individual elements that make up their rover. Hopefully we'll see some action over there soon, but looking back over to pitch A, looks like we're seeing an attempt by Scorpio, Project Scorpio, in the paver placement. They have just under 14 minutes remaining. Now at this point, for the legendary rover team, they were closing in on completing all of the tasks for excavation and construction. To give a comparison of just how quickly they completed that, you can see their GUI there, and something we've been really interested by from this team is that digital twin that they have there, the rover visualization window. Very interesting to see how useful that's been for them. You can see how it's mimicking the position of their robotic arm in real life. Caleb talked a lot about how spatial awareness and depth perception is really critical for teams who are being operators in the base station. A digital twin like this could be giving them that extra 3D surrounds that they can't get from multiple camera placement. Quite a large handle on these pavers. I suppose they want to be able to maximize the area for making contact with their end effector. A bit like a coat hanger, I'm going to call this design.
Yeah, very interesting design here. I do like how they've thought through the fact that actually getting a really precise angle, especially with the end effector, can be quite a tricky thing. How can you combat that? Well, make the area nice and large that you can actually reach into. So this is a really clever idea. interesting, again, similar attempt that we've seen before of doing the sort of blocks at a time to bring them over and have them stacked up that way. I think this is, yeah, they'll actually be able to go through this hopefully quite quickly, and we'll see how they'll be able to build that one up once it's ready to be completed.
Now these pavers must be connected after they are deployed. They're not allowed to use adhesives, meshes, or magnets to do this. Pavers must also conform to some dimension requirements as well to avoid any cheating with this task. Just laying down one long paver.
Yeah, absolutely. And throwing back over to Pitch B real quick to see how things are going, we actually have movement by our Uni of Wollongong team happening. Look at that over in autonomous. Round of applause from the audience there. Again, we've spoken for ages about how tricky autonomous is, and that's never going to change. Autonomous is never going to get easier. However, teams have absolutely been rising to the challenge today, and to actually see this happening is very interesting. Now, I can't wait to actually see from the control end, if we can get, like, hopefully see what the controllers can actually see. I'm really curious about what inputs their rover is taking in at the moment, because we've got the camera by the looks of it, but I'm wondering if there's any other sensors. Oh, and here we go. We can see the cameras that they're looking at right now. I'm curious, very interesting. Hopefully we'll get an interview with them later on to see if it's just the cameras for their autonomous, or they may also be using some other kind of sensors. And then always the follow-up question is, how are they fusing those sensors together to actually get a full, realistic and accurate picture of where they are, where they need to go, and then a map afterwards.
That will be really interesting to see, and certainly looking at the rover design itself, it doesn't appear that they have as many depth sensing cameras attached as some of the other teams have. That doesn't mean that they don't have any. Very interesting to see what they're relying on here. Again, hands off the controller so we can confirm that they are in some sort of autonomous mode. Team sort of comparing landmarks. Looks like they might have one large camera attached to that pole in the corner of the chassis. Potentially, oh, I almost was going to say that looked like a LiDAR sensor, but that appears to just be an LED.
Could be, perhaps to the bottom left of that, I do notice another thing. Perhaps that is another camera. In fact, I do actually remember seeing on their interface 2 camera feeds. So it does appear, yeah, camera 0 and camera 1. So it does appear that they do have 2 different cameras, and they both appear to be, from those views, mounted on that top piece in the chassis pointing downwards. So perhaps maybe they're using some sort of computer vision that's taking in both camera feeds that are a little bit offset by a known amount, sort of like how our eyes work, to figure out where it is. So maybe they don't even need any other kind of sensors. Maybe whatever algorithms they're using are enabling them to do this based just off of the cameras, which is a really interesting thing if they are, because obviously cameras are useful for operator control, and if they're able to reduce the amount of sensors on the robot, obviously more sensors is never necessarily a bad thing, but they can reduce their cost of the design, and also perhaps there might be some compatibility issues with different sensors that they don't have to worry about if they're keeping that to a minimum. So this is really fantastic that the rover is able to drive around given just those 2 camera inputs. They've obviously thought quite a bit into computer vision, and I'll be very curious to talk to them about that later.
Hopefully we can hear from team, as we've heard from some of the others this morning that have attempted the mapping and autonomous task. It's a similar style to Monash, making careful, precise movements around the track. AGH turning up the velocity just a little bit more. Of course, the rover does not want to be colliding with any of the landmarks or marked pieces of debris because it will result in a points penalty. And as teams are developing the system and testing it for the first time, they often might want to opt for that slower velocity. Avoid any points penalty. Look at that rotation there. Incredible scenes from the University of Wollongong. Reminded, there is nobody behind the wheel of this rover. It is making these decisions completely on the autonomous system provided by the team. As Caleb, you mentioned earlier, this type of autonomous operation is exactly what we need going forward for future space missions. You mentioned that with other surfaces like Mars, the delay can be about 20 minutes for a round trip to send a command, and if the rover's in trouble, humans will not be able to do much to fix that problem, so the rover needs to be able to make the decisions to save itself without the human providing those command inputs. Slightly less bad for the lunar surface. We don't quite have that delay. It is about 30 seconds, I think, from memory. But still, if we have this idea of swarm robotics in the future, of multiple robots acting together to complete a task, we want them to be able to make decisions on their own. Particularly if we have these large arrays of rovers, we can't have a whole mission control of 100 human operators. We need to be able to work out how this autonomous technology can help us in the future. And that's what we're developing here on the pitch. Cutting back to pitch A, we've got Project Scorpio here in their last 5 minutes. Very interesting. They have continued to persevere with the tile paver placement. Doesn't look like they've had any interest in the rock clearing. Wait and see whether they continue with the paver placement or abandon it to try and nab some points from the rock clearing. If they're equipped to be able to do that, what do you think they might be able to do with that end effector? Now, what's interesting here with these pavers, the way they've got that sort of coat hanger design, is the way that that's affecting the stability of that paver, making it quite hard to place flat. It's really affecting the mass distribution there.
Again, it all comes down to the discussion of trade-offs in engineering. So one benefit of the coat hanger is being able to, quite easily grasp it and get access to it using their arm. But then, like you were saying about the stability being perhaps something that's tricky, the team would have obviously gone through and tested and figured out where the trade-offs can be made and made a decision based on that testing. But this is such an interesting strategy with the coat hanger design. I'm really curious to see how this piece actually goes on. And especially with time ticking, it's something that'll be very interesting, to see how they do with this one task here.
Yeah, absolutely. And even if they choose to abandon this task, just getting rid of that paver seems to be proving a little bit difficult for the team. You can see how they're trying to place it flat. Reminded that the pavers must be connected once you place them together.
We got one of the coordinates.
So looking through the rules, a paver is considered successfully placed if it is completely flat on the surface at the end of the task. So its entire base must be in contact with the ground, and the pavers can't overlap in a way that means they do not lie flat. Very interesting consideration here, given the topology of this field.
I also just want to point out what an interesting end effector they're using at the moment. The bottom element of that having moved in the direction that it did just then to allow them to actually grasp onto the coat hanger. Using that and the top piece, it does look like they can actually latch onto that from different angles, and perhaps that was part of the thinking with the design of their end effector. Maybe they wanted to make it so that they wouldn't have to move the whole arm around, which is a time-consuming process, and obviously the time is ticking. So that's something that they likely thought through and thought, well, hang on, if we make this something that we can latch onto from different angles and make our end effector one that can be done in wherever the orientation of the arm is at that point in time, they can save some time.
Yeah, again, it's all about that trade-off. Do you maximize opportunities to grab it versus the trade-off of losing that stability in the paver, and hence the placement might end up not being completely flat and you lose the points altogether, versus having quite a narrow area to grapple onto and you might waste precious minutes trying to get a grip on the paver. This is all part of the fun of design and testing, right? This is the engineering design life cycle, so I'm sure they'll take the design from today, get a lot of lessons learned and iterate on it for next year, coming back with a new and improved design. We saw Inset before the University of Wollongong. Their rover is still on the move, a very promising sign that they are progressing in their achievements in the autonomous task. 15 minutes remaining, and that's still plenty of time to try and make their way around the pitch. As Project Scorpio head into those final seconds, and time is up. Give Project Scorpio a round of applause. Amazing efforts today. Perhaps not as much as they would have liked, but nonetheless, fantastic display of that robotic arm, drive system all working together here. They're able to deliver a paver system too.
I was particularly impressed with their bucket system that they were using and how they were able to use it in two different ways, both for regolith collection and then also collecting the debris, using the same component for different things. Again, such a valuable thing, because that means in real life when we go up to the moon, to Mars, we don't have to pack as many components on a rover. We're saving weight, and sending stuff up to space is expensive, and so the less we can send and the more it can do, absolutely a valuable thing. Now checking back in with UOW and their mapping, going nice and smooth, and I do know now that I do see another camera on the front there, which does appear to perhaps be a depth sensing camera, so maybe that's answering some more of our questions there. Again, the more you watch it, the more you learn about the designs, but it looks like it is continuing to move very smoothly, which is what we want to see, because as soon as you start driving around very fast, that is when things get a little bit inaccurate, especially in autonomous. So slow and steady absolutely does win the race here. And again, I'll be very interested to see how they actually generate maps and what they produce. And I also like the little duck there that they've got. That's something I just noticed. We'll count that as a mascot.
Great to confirm they've got that depth sensing camera in the front there. Again, just the way these designs reveal themselves as we get more angles and they unfold in their attempts at the task. Just amazing. As we have pitch A's field resetting for BlueSat to come out for the attempt, we're going to cut to another interview over in the workshop. We'll throw to you.
I'm joined by Heather from the Adelaide Rover team, who are just about to go on to do their final challenge. Heather, how's the team feeling at the moment?
Honestly, we've had a pretty long few days, but we're trying to keep energy up. We've been blasting music, all of that sort of stuff. I reckon we're feeling pretty good. We're about to head over in about 10 minutes, I think. They're just sort of doing, final checks and stuff.
Awesome. So can you run me through what today looks like for your team, obviously preparing for that final challenge? What kind of steps have you guys been taking to get yourselves and the rover ready?
So this morning has mostly been tests of like the payload system, so like scoop testing, drive testing, that type of stuff. Most of it had sort of been done by the time we got here, so really all we're doing is, just making sure everyone kind of knows what's up. But yeah, so really mostly the rest of the day will just look like going over to the judges' tent, making sure everything's all good, weight and dimension-wise, and yeah, then having a great time.
Yeah, awesome. So obviously it's been a 4-day challenge. What do you guys find has been the biggest challenge for you, and how have you guys worked through that?
Honestly, the biggest challenges have probably been problem solving in the moment, because, nothing ever goes exactly to plan, and, we kind of planned for that. So really just making sure that everyone's on the same page, making sure everyone's, taking care of themselves, sleeping enough, all of that sort of stuff. But honestly, it's been pretty smooth sailing in terms of, the entire team and everything. It's just been a great time, yeah.
Absolutely. And, as mentioned before, it has been very long days, lots of work going into this rover. What do your team do to keep that morale high throughout the 4-day challenge?
Yeah, so as all of the teams surrounding us will know, we have brought speakers every day, and we've been playing some pretty good music, if I do say so myself. Going on snack runs, just having chats, making sure that, we're not too stressed.
Yeah, absolutely. Who's been on the playlist?
Look, I've tried to, have some variety. We've got, normal bangers. I think we've played Kokomo by the Beach Boys about 7 times in the past 24 hours. So, yeah.
Fantastic. So, best of luck for your final challenge, and we'll see you afterwards. Thanks, Heather. See ya.
I don't know about you, Caleb, but Kokomo would put me into a state of relaxation. Imagine sipping some pina coladas by the beach. I'm sure that's what the team will be doing after tonight, when this long challenge has come to a conclusion. And not just these past 4 days, but the development cycle as well. For many teams, they begin iterating on the next rover as soon as this one finishes. So it can be a 12-month slog. Again, they are building these rovers in their spare time, outside of full-time studies and jobs. Most students have another job alongside studies, alongside their extracurriculars. I think we were in that situation as well, and it's because this challenge is so much fun, and like Heather was just saying there, the vibes are off the charts, and when you're all working together like a team and everyone's in the same situation, being fueled by those snack runs, it keeps you coming back year after year.
Absolutely. This is one of those things, this challenge, where being a part of it, you are able to work on something but also make friends. Like, it's a whole team effort. Like, you are spending so much time with everyone else on the team. You're absolutely going to have a good time, even if it's a little bit stressful at times, which it definitely does get. Having a look at how UOW is doing with their mapping and autonomous, still looks like it's going smoothly. Still looks like it's going very smoothly, generating that map, getting an idea of what the field looks like. Again, we'll be very curious to see what they're looking at. So they've got their live camera feeds there. It will be very interesting to see the map that they generate and how that looks, and I'm wondering what the format of it's going to be, whether it'll be similar to what other teams have made or whether they'll do something different entirely. Completely up to them. Obviously, the more detail, the more points is sort of how that part of it works, but in terms of the actual display of the map, that is up to the teams, which is a really cool thing because it gives them some flexibility. It does look like they're actually having a look into what's being generated on their screens right now and perhaps doing some decision making and planning.
Yeah, it was interesting how you spoke about the different maps generated by the teams. Even the difference between Monash and what AGH had as well. There was a 3D map and a 2D sort of overhead bird's eye view, but they were using what looked like exactly the same software. So quite interesting to see there the setup of the different systems. I'm imagining if you have more of those depth sensing cameras, potentially that's more dimensions. Again, calling on my background, not necessarily a lot of experience here in autonomy. I certainly focused more on the mechanical hardware aspects of our rover, but it's really fascinating to see how this all plays out.
it all ties back into the whole situation that the data they're collecting is useful for multiple purposes. The raw data itself is what the rover can use to actually drive and navigate and make decisions about where to go. But then afterwards, how they present that data to the judges, it's an analogue for in the real world where they're presenting map data to scientists or geologists or people from other fields who may not be engineers or even scientists at all, and how they communicate that in a clear and concise way. Because engineering is just about communication as much as it is actually making things. It's one thing to make something, but then to actually get people interested and engaged and understand what you're doing, it's one of the most important aspects. And I think the really cool thing about the Australian Rover Challenge and the teams that are competing is it's not just scientists and engineers. There are business students on the teams. There are finance students crunching the numbers, getting sponsorships, because it's all well and good having a $35,000 budget that you're allowed to within the rules spend, but actually getting the cash is another thing. And so that's why it is so important that these teams have practiced branding, marketing, talking to sponsors, and actually getting themselves out there so that they can be funded to actually compete, which is an incredible thing. And then, of course, the business and HR and team management that actually goes into this. Yeah, it's huge. When we're talking about teams of 40, 50, 60 people, more than that even, how do you manage that? How do you do the work breakdown? How do you make sure everyone's actually healthy and happy on the team and enjoying the time and actually taking something from it? It's way more than science and engineering, but that goes on to the whole fact that the space industry and the engineering industry as a whole is more than that, and there are so many human aspects and factors to consider. All ties in.
I completely agree with you on that point, and we often sort of compare and contrast space missions to producing a movie. You know, you've got your actors, in this case would be our rovers, but in real life it could be astronauts as well. And then you need the directors and the production assistants and the camera operators, the screenwriters, the CGI and effects people, the costume makers. All of those roles are absolutely essential to the production of that movie. And as you just highlighted there, you know, all of those other things we might not necessarily come to mind when we consider a space mission, but like the finance and the economics behind it, the logistics planners, the communicators who are able to convey the importance of this mission and why this research matters. Because of course, if we don't have that aspect, then what's the point in going? It's the inspiration arm of space and our ability to communicate how it can continue to inspire the next generation and how we can use that data to help life here on Earth. It all makes it worthwhile. Incredible 3D map there. Wow, check that out. Caleb, you must be freaking out right now. University of Wollongong's map data coming through on the screen there. What do you have to say about it?
Oh yeah, I'm going crazy over this. So what I'm looking at, it appears to be like got a point cloud of all of the data that I'm guessing their 3D camera / possibly LiDAR or other kind of sensors has generated. The really interesting thing, now that we're visualizing that and having a look, I mean, how detailed does that look? Come on, I can see more from this map than I can see, and I'm looking right at the field right now. The amount of details there are incredible, and it'll be really interesting to see what they do with that detail. And it looks like they perhaps have some different overlay settings that they can export. Wow, this is just like a 3D world. This is absolutely incredible. What are they going to show on it next, and how are they going to present that information will be a very interesting thing.
You were just talking about we don't have Google Street View for the moon. Maybe they've done it. Maybe they've just come up with a way to invent Google Street View for the moon. Should patent that, guys. Oh, maybe that is the end of their autonomous phase. They've picked up the controller. If we see the rover move, they will be cutting into the non-autonomous phase. Let's watch. Yep, there's a human operator there. We sense some movement. We think they are in the non-autonomous phase of this task now with just 3 minutes remaining. They'll be trying to get the coordinates of all of the different sides to report back to the judges. Like Caleb said, they'll have to convey their approach to the autonomous task and report the coordinates with as much accuracy as possible to win the points, proving that they know what they're talking about. Just as they had to do with the space resources task as well, just a handful of days earlier. Conveying what they know about the water content and the minerals and other volatiles on the lunar surface. These teams really get a comprehensive understanding of the moon.
with 2 minutes left, it'll be very interesting to see what they're able to come up with now that they're going through and finishing things up. Over on pitch A, we now have, with the excavation and construction task, we have BlueSat getting ready to go with that from the University of New South Wales. It looks like they're making their final checks and adjustments on the lander there, so it'll be very interesting to see when they get started. Just noting they'll have probably around the half an hour mark. Well, we're at 31:45 now. So we might have a little bit less time after the setup process is all completed, but still plenty of time to do lots of excavation and construction activities, and it'll be very interesting to see how they prioritise their time now and what tasks they actually end up going for, what activity I should say rather.
Yeah, it'd be great to check in on BlueSat because I know they attempted the post-landing task on Friday, but they didn't quite make it off the lander. They ran into a few troubles there. This is their first time back out on the pitch since they last attempted that task. So it'll be awesome to see what they might be able to achieve today. Let's give them some support. If they can get that rover moving and get off the lander, that will be absolutely huge for this team. So give them some love. Just 45 seconds remain on pitch B, as well as the University of Wollongong. I believe they might be attempting not an autonomous phase, but looking at the movement, that's not actually entirely clear. Hands are off the controller again, so potentially this actually is still autonomous. Might have been switching something else back in the base station there. Counting down to the final 10 seconds there. That is time up for the University of Wollongong. They have completed the Australian Rover Challenge. Give them a round of applause. That is phenomenal. Well done to the University of Wollongong, attempting every task. The rover has come to a stop too. That's always a good sign. No e-stop needed. Amazing job. Oh, we can see another rover coming out there in the wings. That looks like it's going to be UQ Space. Reminder that UQ were neck and neck with AGH Space Systems at the conclusion of yesterday and throughout the week as well. A fabulous battle between these teams. Just a handful of points in between them. Last time we checked in, it was just 4 points. And we know that there are 100 points up for grabs with each of these tasks. So you can see how 4 points is so incredibly fine. Maybe even one of the closest challenges that we've had.
Absolutely, and back over on pitch A now. We've got BlueSat gearing up for the excavation and construction task. Be very interesting to see the rover start some movement soon. It's a very nicely designed rover, I must say. I'm very curious to see what the suspension system, how it works, because it does look slightly different to most of the others that we've seen today. And so I'll be very curious to see what that looks like driving around. And also for the task, it's